The Miyoo Mini and the RG35XX are not in the same class. In motoring, there are 5, 6, 7 or even more cars in a very specific class such as compact SUV or mini hatchback. We don't have that luxury in retro gaming yet. What we have is a similar device at a similar price, gunning for the same market share. Beginner retro gamers or someone looking for a smaller companion to one of their bigger devices. So, while the Miyoo Mini stands on its own as the world's best mini handheld, and the RG35X probably also stands on its own as the world's best sort of compact handheld, due to their price and relatively similar size, we have to compare them and have a look at them and decide which one is best. So here is my Miyoo Mini versus RG35XX shootout. Perceived quality. When you look at the RG35XX when it first arrives, it immediately just feels solid, premium. It's got a lovely matte finish here. These shoulder buttons, like them or hate them, have got a nice sort of soft click to them, and it just feels premium. Some people don't like the glossy buttons, but overall, I'm going to give this an 8 out of 10 for perceived quality. And on the Miyoo Mini, I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10 for perceived quality, purely because it's a little bit rattly when it first arrives, but it does feel very premium when you first get it. However, moving straight on to real world quality. Now, I have the luxury of having had this for almost 6 months now. I've had the Miyoo Mini for quite some time. The RG35X I've only had for about 2 weeks, but once I'd reached the 2-week point on the Miyoo Mini, I started to notice that it's not the best made device. However, the more I use this device, the more I'm convinced it's made very, very well. And so I'm giving the Miyoo Mini a 5 out of 10 for real world quality, and the RG35XX a 9 out of 10 for real world quality, purely because one of the big things, the issues that I have with this device, and I've mentioned this in other videos, is that this battery door keeps popping off. The battery has flung out a couple of times, and this connector here has actually cracked. That is an issue. You know, other people have reported other issues with the device. I don't want to go too crazy about it because we are a global community and a lot of people complain about a lot of devices, but there definitely is a big quality difference in build between this and this. But then moving on to retro feels, the Miyoo Mini wins hands down. The Miyoo Mini, I've actually given it a higher score now that I've been doing this video. I give it a 10 out of 10 for retro feels. What I mean by retro feels is when you pick this up, it feels like a Game Boy. It immediately takes you back to the olden days and makes you feel like you're playing an old game, but then with this beautiful modern screen. And so it just has all the right bits and pieces to make it feel like something very special. And so even though it's poor quality, I think this really deserves the cult following that it's achieved. You know, I mean, Miyoo, they've put out a version 3 which has caused more issues for the device. You know, it really has had sort of some funny little quirks to it, but it still really is a lovely retro gaming device. The RG35XX, on the other hand, it's stunning. I love it. It's a perfectly executed device, but it definitely lacks something. It lacks the X factor that the Miyoo Mini has. And so for retro feels, I give this one a 6 and I give this a 10 out of 10. Don't get me wrong, I love this device, and this probably this has overtaken this just because it is more solid, so I feel more comfortable putting it in my pockets. But it doesn't have the X factor that the Miyoo Mini does. Size. So this isn't really a helpful metric. I'm not going to score these two on this because obviously, like I said in the beginning, these are not in the same class. This is a mini handheld, and this is what I'm calling a compact handheld. So this is the size of a box of cigarettes or box of cards, and this is the size of almost 2 of those. So this is sort of a third bigger. I don't know. Somebody give me some good fractions on that. But, you know, it is a much larger device. So in terms of size, this is definitely the more pocketable device. It is the device that's much easier to put in the pocket because of the shoulder buttons. But unfortunately, the quality holds it back on here. But in terms of size, this definitely wins. But I'm not going to score it because these are 2 very different devices in terms of size. Pocketability, this is where it does get sort of interesting if you're a nerd like me. These shoulder buttons definitely hamper the pocketability. They hook on your pocket as they slide into your pockets, and it's big, so it definitely shows in your pockets. So the RG35XX definitely shows that it's in your pocket, whereas I can quickly slip this in my pocket and no one knows I even have a retro gaming device on me. So that's quite nice. It's sort of a covert device. And so in terms of pocketability, the Miyoo Mini is definitely a 10. It's the most pocketable device out there. It's the best. While the RG35XX is a 7 out of 10 for pocketability, purely because of those shoulder buttons holding it back a little bit. Otherwise, it would have scored higher. Buttons. So I have mentioned these glossy buttons. Some people don't like them. They are not bothering me at all. My sort of favorite mini device is the RG280V, and this has the matte black buttons, and these are my favorite. I really like those. These aren't bothering me, and I'm enjoying playing both of these devices, so that doesn't bother me. And the pressing of these buttons, so both these are rubber membranes, but they do have a slight dome switch clickiness to them. So they're a nice sort of balance between those, and they do have that sort of, I don't know if they have a retro feel because they're not very mushy. They are nice to press. The function button, I hate the function button on this thing. It just is so strange, and you don't always know if you are pressing it, or it just is an odd button. Then sometimes I press it too long and I go out of a game. So I really don't like that, and it creaks the whole device when you press it. Whereas this device, if I go into a game and I want to get out of it with this menu button, it's a nice press to it. It's got a nice feeling to it. So I do enjoy that about the RG35XX and the start and select. These are more clicky, these are softer. And then the D-pad. I'm not an expert on this, but I did hear Taki Udon say something about this is not a concave setup inside. So I should do a tear down and have a look at that. But definitely this D-pad doesn't have that sort of natural feeling to it when you're trying to play Street Fighter and that sort of thing. So that definitely holds this one back. In terms of gameplay, I think this one's got a smooth, glossy finish. I'll probably give the win to the D-pad on this one, but they are both pretty good. And then the power button on here is very good. The reset button on here is very good. And the volume rocker is slightly raised, and I do like that about this. This has a volume scroll wheel, which I prefer, but not a lot of devices have them anymore. And so in terms of buttons, I would give the RG35XX an 8, the Miyoo Mini a 6. The reason I gave it a 6 is the buttons are a bit squeaky and clunky, but I didn't luck out. I got unlucky when it comes to these buttons, and even though this is a version 2, my buttons are still scraping along the edge of the device. And so I'm just unhappy with that, and so I gave it a 6. So display. Both of these have excellent displays. In my in-depth review of this device, I said that the RG351V had the best display, this was in the middle, and this came in third, but by a fraction of a margin. They're all lovely screens. This is obviously a smaller screen. I'm not going to score it down because of that. What I will say is that this has an 8.5 screen, 8.5 out of 10, and this has an 8 out of 10. They are both beautiful screens, great saturation, great depth of color. They really are good screens, especially for the price. Performance and gameplay. I've done a lot of gameplay on these devices by now. This device plays a huge amount of the PS1 catalog. I actually haven't encountered games that I can't play properly. Maybe Colin McRae 2.0 might not play as well in here as it does in here. I'm not sure, but so technically this has a higher spec, or all-winner A9. I think there's an all-winner A7 or something like that. But due to access to the GPU or whatever it might be, and maybe it's because of the bigger screen, graphic outputs, I'm not sure. I don't like to get into the weeds of that sort of thing. But these devices are pretty even-keeled when it comes to performance. And so in terms of gameplay, I really enjoy both of them. They're both very fluid performance, and now Garlic OS is getting better. It was updated today. And so in terms of performance and in terms of gameplay, I would give the Miyoo Mini the 7 and the RG35XX a 6, purely just because Garlic OS is a little bit behind at the moment. It just needs a few more updates to tweak it and optimize emulators and unlock the GPU or whatever he needs to do on the technical side. Audio. So let's quickly do an audio test. I'm going to put this device here. Okay, so with the limiter off, the processing off the mic, and I put those on full blast, you can give your own analysis there, but in the end, this is louder and has a greater depth of sound, a greater sort of dynamic range of sound. And so I definitely give the RG35, these speakers are not going to win any races, against any of the bigger devices, but for this test, I'm just going to give this a 7 and give this a 5. And then battery life. And so, I have been playing with this a lot. And so the battery life, as I mentioned in my in-depth review, I said I'm not sure that this is going to do very well because this is a 2100 milliamp hour battery. And then if you go in here, this is a 2000 milliamp hour battery for a smaller screen, smaller device. And it's definitely what I suspected. So this is a 5 to 6 hour device, which is great for this size device, and it never worries me. That kind of hour time, that kind of time on a device is good. It feels good, and it doesn't feel like I have to charge it all the time. Whereas this, Anbernic claim that this does 5 hours. I think it's more like 4 hours, and sometimes maybe even less. Maybe because I've been playing around with operating systems and that sort of thing. But the battery life is not exceptional on here. I just have to charge it more. That's the thing. But it's not as bad as, say, like the POCKETABILITY V90. It's not that bad, but it is worse than the Miyoo Mini. But I mean, it's got almost the same battery with a bigger screen. So go figure, So for battery life, a 9 and a 7. Okay, and then considering the custom firmwares. Now, this again is not a very fair comparison, but I'm going to try give a fair grading here. And S is the clear winner right now. Obviously, it's a more mature firmware. It's one of my favorite firmwares on any device. It really is very, very good. And then Garlic OS is still under development. It doesn't have themes. It doesn't even have sort of settings for the front end. You just get what you get, which I kind of like. So that is a pro for it at the moment. I like the simplicity of it. I like that it doesn't have themes. I like that it just comes the way it is. I'm going to give this a grading on sort of where we're headed and where we are right now, and meet it somewhere in between. So give the Miyoo Mini a 9.5 for firmware, and give the RG35XX a 7 out of 10 for firmware. I do think we're gonna, hopefully, if you can sort out performance issues, we're gonna reach this being another 9.5 custom firmware device. So themes, I'm not going to score this because this doesn't have any themes. I installed the Miyoo Mini images onto the theme just so that I could get the purple with my purple device, so it matches. But you can see here, this has a whole lot of themes that you can go through. Very specific to the Miyoo Mini. And again, this is why the Miyoo Mini is so special, is that it has this sort of very unique, niche, cult vibe to it, and I really like that about it. So I'm not going to give a score here, but definitely this has some good themes to it. Then pricing and availability, and here is where the Miyoo Mini really has an issue, because you literally have to sit on the AliExpress store and refresh it every hour and hope that you can find one eventually. At this point, if you really, really want one, go onto Amazon and buy one for $100. So yeah, it has gotten that bad. Whereas the 35XX is available right now. So from Anbernic's website, it's readily available today. You can go buy one. It'll reach you in a reasonable amount of time. And so in terms of pricing and availability, this is like a 2 and this is a 10. So, I'm not going to include that score in this because it's just not fair. That it is what it is. So standout features. The Miyoo Mini, the first thing is just the nostalgia and that X factor that I mentioned. It has something very special about it. And then something I didn't mention when I talked through on the buttons is these shoulder buttons. People love to hate these shoulder buttons, but they are the perfect design for what it is. It makes it sleek and easy to put in your pocket. And so that is another standout feature, is just the overall design of this thing. And then it has a lovely little screen. The RG35XX is the build quality. It really is built very, very well. It's a very well-made device, and it has the stunning screen. And this could possibly be the most well-balanced device on the market. For a cheap device to be almost perfectly center-gravitied That's quite something. That's what you get in like Apple devices. So that is quite a special little thing about it. So yeah, those are the standout features between those two. I want to talk about alternative buys, other devices to consider. People keep mentioning the V90 to me. I've kind of written it off, and I'm kind of rethinking maybe I should buy another one and do another video about it and just say the pros and cons and why people still love that device. But the V90 is very old now. The firmware is aging. It doesn't come anywhere close to this. I talk about the thing of the graph of diminishing returns, and with the V90, you're not getting enough for the money that you're spending on it. Whereas with these devices, okay, this is $100 if you go my Amazon route, so that's a little bit ridiculous in terms of the point of diminishing returns. But if you get it at the proper price, these devices offer way more for their money compared to the POCKETABILITY V90. So I'm going to still write that one off as an option. So I don't recommend that. I'd rather get these two as instead of the V90. I'd rather save for a month and spend that extra $10, $20 and get something better. Then the RG2 ATV. I have mentioned many times in my videos that this is my favorite mini device. It is a bit of a personal preference because of the design. I owned a Famicom device when I was older. That was my gaming console. I didn't own any other gaming consoles. This whole retro journey is discovering the consoles that I couldn't afford as a child. And so this is my favorite little device. I love it. It plays all the games I wanted to, although it can't play all PS1s, and that's where these two sort of have won me over, is I can play almost all the PS1 games on here. So I'm discovering all the PS1 games that I missed out on here. So if you are considering the RG2 ATV, it's slightly underpowered compared to these two, but it is very well made once again. And it has a lovely little operating system. Atom Images is very easy to use and easy to install. So if you want something a little bit different, then the RG2 ATV is definitely worth it. The GKD Mini, I'll put a picture on the screen now, is very nice, but it's quite expensive, and you're not going to get any custom firmware with that thing. So if you are into the hobby and you want to play around with all these custom firmwares, the GKD Mini is just as it is. That's more a device you buy for your kid for Christmas. And then the Trim UI Smart is okay, but I really don't think it's worth it for the money. What you get for the money with the Trim UI Smart compared to these two, even though it does have Bluetooth and all those sorts of things, I think these are better for your money. And so I really think, in terms of small devices, obviously I'm calling this the compact device, I'm calling this the mini device. I think I do have the world's two best options out there on my desk right now. So who should buy these? I am singing their praises. I think both are excellent first-time buys. If you are a first-time buyer, the stock OS is quite good on here, the stock operating system. So when you get it, you can just start playing. Same with this, stock operating system is not too bad. You can just go for it when you start. Both are excellent travel companions. Like I said, I took this one on an overseas trip with me. Maybe that's one of the reasons why it is getting a little bit worn. They are both great travel companions. And then both are great companions to a larger device. So I'm planning to get the Retroid Pocket 3 Plus in the studio, and one of these will be the companion to that. If I've got the Retroid Pocket 3 Plus on my desk, on my table next to my bed, this will be in my pocket, or in the car, or going with me when I pick up the kids from school. So it's a great companion to a larger device. So I like to not tally up the scores so that what I say now could either be weird or interesting or whatever compared to what the scores actually ended up being. But my favorite pick out of these two, it's really difficult to say, but in terms of as a perspective of someone who makes videos that's concerned about the entire world watching it and judging me on what I say, I definitely would rather recommend the RG35XX. Purely the same reason I recommended the RG2 ATV over the Miyoo Mini is because of the quality. I don't like recommending this because you're going to sit on AliExpress and get very excited about this device, and then 6 months later you're going to go, the screen broke, or the battery door broke, or the buttons are scraping, or whatever. There just are so many things that seem to go wrong with this device. And so I would much rather recommend this to the public. However, this really does have a special place in the gaming community's hearts. It really is a special little device. In fact, it's something that if you are getting into the hobby, it's something worth owning. It's something worth getting out there and getting. Like, I'm very excited that I managed to get this because they're quite hard to get into South Africa. So, it's a collector's item. So there you go. I'm contradicting myself. Have a lovely day.